Welcome to Representation Without Taxation with Jill McBride Baxter, a veteran sports law attorney for the past 30 years and certified NFLPA contract advisor.
I'm about three things: protection, advocacy, and trust.
Not only is Jill an attorney, she's the daughter of a college football coach and the wife of a college football coach, and she knows all of the issues from all angles. This is Representation Without Taxation, a one-of-a-kind show featuring critically relevant material for contract employees in sports.
This week, I'm going to talk about Conference Realignment. It has really taken a different shape after everybody but two of the teams from the Pac-12 will remain in 2024. The situation with the Pac-12 is that there are certain assets that are owned by the Pac-12, and if Oregon State and Washington State, who are the two remaining schools, can rebuild the conference, they then can keep those assets and divide them amongst those schools. And the other schools that will no longer be in the Pac-12 will not be getting to share in the remaining assets. The remaining assets would be like media deals, the logos, any advertisement deals they have, and even the college football playoff, which is a significant asset if they will allow, if the college football playoff will allow the Pac-12 to remain in the college football playoff. All of those assets are worth a significant amount of money. So what should Oregon State and Washington State do? In a world, in a perfect world, I would like to see a reverse merger of the Mountain West and the Pac-12, and then you would build the Pac-12 would be back to the amount of teams that you would need to create 12. The important part of that is prior to many of the teams leaving, there was a media deal with Apple TV that was actually worth $21 million, and then I think an additional $4 million for any new subscribers. So it would be, in order to keep a West Coast base, it would be a great way to rebuild the Pac-12, and then they would have, well, at least they would have the amount of teams that they currently have, and you would have a West Coast based league, which is what the Pac-12 has always been. I also would consider, and I don't know whether this is a possibility, is would they be able to lure some of those schools back to the Pac-12? One of the problems with the conference realignment, with some of the teams from the Pac-12 going to the Big Ten and some going to the ACC and some going to the Big 12, is all of the student athletes from those universities will be traveling to the East Coast, which is, or East, South, Midwest, much further than they have been in the past. Maybe you would do that for one game, but when you're all of a sudden having to do at least 6 football games and maybe more than half of your basketball games, women's and men's, and then all of the other sports, whether it's swimming and golf, which there's 21 sports, it's going to be a significant increase in the budget for athletic departments. And I just wonder what that's going to look like. I also think you're going to see a lot of student athletes that are current Pac-12 student athletes whose schools chose to go into new conferences. I think you're going to see a lot of them go into the transfer portal because maybe they don't want to participate in all that travel while they're getting their education. So I see that there's going to be a lot of economic impact, certainly to the sports that are not football and basketball, because a lot of, at least in football for sure, they often book not commercial flights, but they book charters, whereas most of the other sports are going by commercial flights. Having traveled quite a bit, so many things can happen while you're traveling. Flights can be delayed, you're in airports for a long period of time, and that can be quite exhausting for a student athlete, on top of with all of the school and going back and forth. I know, like, University of Hawaii has always had travel quite a bit with their student athletes, and I know that that's hard on their student athletes, because I even know every time a school travels to Hawaii to play, it significantly impacts the student athletes. There's a time change. Flying that far to get to a game is tiring for the team. And I see where this is just going to impact student athletes at all of those schools. And it's going to impact football and basketball too. So I just wonder how this is all going to play out. It's unfortunate that the Pac-12 was not able to make some kind of a deal sooner, so that so many of the schools did not leave this year. So I'm hoping that there's what they call a reverse merger of the leagues of the Mountain West and the Pac-12, and I'm hoping long term that is a better solution for the remaining two schools in the Pac-12, Oregon and Washington State. And it will be interesting to see what happens. I noticed recently that there was a lawsuit filed by Oregon State and Washington State and basically they filed a restraining order, and they did win, to make sure that they were going to be the ones that were making all the decisions for the Pac-12 moving forward, and that the current teams could not be involved in any decision making, because they will not be members of the Pac-12 in 2024. So, and they did win that restraining order, Oregon State and Washington State. So they currently are definitely in control of the assets and what the Pac-12 is going to look like moving forward. I also noticed that they have been, Washington State and Oregon State have been hiring consultants to really kind of create a more of a public relations campaign to support those two schools that really the other schools left behind. They're both in smaller college towns, which from a media perspective, they maybe don't have as many viewers as maybe what a school from LA would have. However, if the whole country gets behind Washington State and Oregon State, there will be lots of people watching those games and supporting two universities who really got left out in the cold by the rest of their, the other institutions. I have heard that some of the institutions didn't want to leave the Pac-12, but they just didn't have any choice because all of a sudden, first it was USC and UCLA left. The next schools that left was Colorado. And then just as they were about to sign the deal, Oregon and Washington notified some of the other schools that they were talking to the Big Ten. And then Utah, Arizona, and Arizona State all said they were going to the Big 12. And then there was only 4 teams left. So Oregon and Washington went to the Big 10. USC and UCLA went to the Big 10. And Colorado went to the Big 12. And Arizona State, and Utah went to the Big 12. Now, they didn't, I know Colorado got a full share from the Big 12, but Utah, Arizona, and Arizona State, I don't know if they've got a full share of the media rights money compared to the other schools, and maybe eventually they will have a full share. I'm not sure about USC and UCLA and Oregon and Washington on how much they each got to join the Big Ten. So it's going to be a very interesting future for all of those schools who decided to change conferences, and it is going to economically impact all of those schools. And I don't know if it's going to be a positive gain or not. It will have to wait and see what happens. So anyways, we'll see what happens with all of the conference realignment. Another interesting tidbit about conference realignment is when Texas and Oklahoma decided to go into the ACC, to the SEC, I know that the Big 12 reached out to the Pac-12 to say, let's just create one big conference, and the Pac-12 chose not to do that. I'm sure looking back now, they probably wish they would have just merged those 2 leagues together. And that's an example of the Big 12 commissioner being really aggressive and the Pac-12 commissioner not being aggressive and seeing that, maybe being in charge of being a 20-team conglomerate would have been a better marriage than what has happened now. So we'll see what happens in the future, and we'll have to keep an eye on what's going on with conference realignment.
If you are an NFL player that needs representation for the 2024 draft, please give me a call. I'm starting to meet with players for next year's draft now. If you are a coach and you are looking for representation, this is a good time to start focusing on the big picture for your career. So you can either email me at jillbaxter@me.com or call me at 559-250-0151. If you are an aspiring sports agent, you may want to subscribe to my online course on how to be a sports agent. And it's called Sports Agent Academy. So I have lots of different opportunities to work with me, and my website is jillmcbridebaxter.com. In the show notes, you will find a link to all of these different opportunities. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Representation Without Taxation. Simply stated, I am always and forever about 3 things: protection, advocacy, and trust. To learn more about my fair fee structure, please visit my website at jillmcbridebaxter.com. If what we were talking about strikes a nerve, please subscribe and definitely share it. Until next time, it doesn't matter what the plan is, as long as you have one.